I'm excited to give you this teaching. This is one that has been I've been struggling with it all week because it's one that's very difficult to follow. Are you ready? Sweet, good. We've been talking about the kingdom of heaven and how this kingdom of heaven, Jesus speaks about it over and over again. It is to be lived presently all the way until he comes again. Amen? It is not some magical thing that just happens. It begins, that transformation happens now and continues. And it's beautiful. So if the kingdom of heaven, if Jesus came back right now, imagine this, he came back right now, how many of you think you would probably have to change some things in your life? Some of your values, some of your attitudes might have to change because you might feel a little out of place. You don't have to raise your hands. I know who you are. Some things may possibly have to change. And the reality is because many of us aren't living it right now. And so today we're going to talk about that kingdom now. Let me pray with you. Lord, I thank you. I praise you for allowing us to be here. Lord, please use me to bring about a message that you gave your people so long ago. Lord, show us its relevance, its meaning now. Amen. The book of Revelation. The book of Revelation is one of these books that I just absolutely love. It was written to a group of people that were being persecuted, and they had to begin using covert language. So that's why we have all these interesting, the beasts and all these things, the Lion of Judah, all this stuff. They had to use covert language so people wouldn't kill them immediately when they read it. They had to use covert language. And so the beauty of chapter 5, which I'm going to read you in a minute, is that John is borrowing from the Roman liturgy. When the emperor would come out, they would pull out this long scroll. And on the scroll is written a bunch of interesting phrases and words about the emperor. Great is the emperor. His reign goes forever. Holy is the emperor. He is now and ever and forevermore. Great is Domitian. And they would read that scroll. And so John is borrowing from this idea. But notice there is a difference here. Chapter 5, Revelation. I saw on the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides, sealed with 7 seals. This is a knock to the emperor, isn't it? Your scroll's good. It's nice. Mine's better. Both sides are filled with these names, and it is sealed. And who's able to open the seal? Is it Emperor Domitian? Is it Caesar? Is it Herod? Who's able to open it? Here's the answer. No one in heaven or earth or under the earth could open the scroll or even look inside. He is attacking not only the emperor, but their gods. Zeus can't do it. The gods below can't do it. The gods of the sea can't do it. Who can do it? Who can open the scroll? I wept and wept because no one was found who was worthy to open the scroll or look inside. Then the elders said, don't weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals. Who is worthy? Me? You? Zeus? No one is worthy but Jesus. He is the only one that is worthy. Who measures up? Not you and me. Jesus is the only one that measures up. When we look in Deuteronomy 24, this is not a new idea that we don't measure up. Would you all agree we don't measure up? But many of you believe you're deserving. Let's go there. Deuteronomy 24:17 says this. Do not deprive the alien or the fatherless of justice, or take the cloak of the widow as a pledge. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you from there. That's why I commanded you to do so. You were slaves. Nothing you did earned you rescue, did it? You can't work hard enough as a slave to become free, can you? You can't. So it's all about God and him being worthy. So watch this. What does he call us to do? Knowing that we are not worthy, only he is worthy. Watch this. It gets tricky. Do not, when you are harvesting in your field and you overlook a sheaf, don't go back and get it. Leave it for the alien, the fatherless, and the widow, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. Imagine this. You have this field, and you're working it every single day. And this is what your life depends on, all this stuff that you're pulling up. And I tell you, you have to get, you can only go through once. And everything that's left, you have to give away. Is that fair? Is that fair? No. It's not fair. You put in the hard work. And so we look at this and we say, the widower? You're telling me this woman who keeps having kids, I have to give her all this food? Just give it to her? She doesn't have to work for it? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's not fair. We're so good at saying that, aren't we? Our children learn it at an early age. It's not fair. My dad would say, I know. But that's not an answer, Dad. Deal with it. Life isn't fair. Always. Life isn't fair, Tony, but I wish it was. It's not fair, Jesus. Then he goes on, when you beat the olives from your trees, this was not an easy process, beating the olives from the trees. When you do this, and of course you wouldn't get all of them. You might get half of them. Don't go over it a second time. Leave what remains for the alien, the fatherless, and the widow. So God, you're telling me, this kid, who isn't even my own kid, by the way, I have to give him all these olives? I've got a family that I have to provide for, and you're telling me I have to give this orphan a bunch of my food? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not fair. I know. Isn't it great? No. And then we go to the vino, your grapes. In your vineyard, don't go over the vines again. Leave what remains for the alien, the fatherless, the widow. You're telling me I have to allow this person who isn't even part of my community, doesn't pay taxes, I have to give them a bunch of my grapes and my harvest and my olives? They're not even part of our group. They haven't gone through the Exodus. I have to give them a bunch of my stuff, a bunch of my grapes? And Jesus says, yeah, you do. And most of our response is, it's not fair. It's not fair, Jesus. And so again, we're reminded in 22, remember that you were slaves in Egypt. That's why I command you to do this thing. God is saying that maybe by participating in my unfairness to you, you will in turn give to others, even though they don't deserve it, just like you didn't deserve it from me. I will give you grace, even though you don't deserve it. And you should in turn do the same. In fact, think about this. How good were the Israelites while they were slaves? They were terrible. They were the worst slaves they could possibly have. Complaining, grumbling all the time. You weren't even good slaves. And I still decided to rescue you from Egypt because I love and I care about you, and I will rescue you. And it's not about you, it's about how good God has been to you. And so he asks you to give the same way. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 43, I always find this interesting. I get put on a bunch of interesting posts, by the way, online, and I always have to laugh because people don't actually come and talk to me very often about an issue. They'll like to post it on Facebook. And they'll post these long dialogues about this or that, and I just smile and I wish them well, which is what we should be doing. This person said, no wonder God hasn't blessed our churches. We're not doing what he's asked us to do. Is that how God works? we do this and this and this, then he'll bless us? Because watch what it says here in Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5, verse 43, go there. You've heard it said, and by the way, this is even more of a struggle, love your enemy and hate your, you've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. That's easy, we're all good at that, right? But I tell you, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. What? God, that is not fair. And then he says this, even more about his unfairness. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good. He sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. In an agrarian culture, sun and rain, how important are these for your crops? They're absolutely necessary for your crops to grow. He sends his rain and his sun on who? The good Adventists. The good Baptist. Who does he send it to? It's not fair. Because this person thinks I have the truth. And this person, it's not fair. God says, I send it, my blessings, to everyone. Are you aware of the blessings? Are you upset that sometimes God is generous? In Matthew chapter 20, I used to read this to my students in Bible class. And I would tell them this story, and I would make up like a modern day tale. I'll tell them that I hired some people to paint a fence. And at the very end of this story, they would be so mad. They're like, that's not fair. You can't pay that person the same. It's not fair. And they would just erupt in anger. Let me read you this story. Matthew 20, 1 through 16. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire men to work in his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius, that's a good amount of money for a day's wage, for the day, and sent them into his vineyard. About the third hour, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, you also go and work in my vineyard. I'll pay you whatever you want, or whatever I feel is right, sorry. So they went. He went out again about the 6th hour, the 9th hour, and did the same. About the 11th hour, he went out and found still others standing around. The 11th hour, he finds workers. He asked them, why have you been standing here all day doing nothing? They said, because we've had no one to hire us. He answers, you also go and work my vineyard. When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, call the workers, pay them their wages, begin with the last ones hired, going on to the first. He does this so that the workers who were there all day get to see what he's about to do, because there's a lesson in this that he wants us to be aware of. A lesson about fairness. So when those who came were hired first, they expected to receive more. But each one of them also received just a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. These men who were hired last worked only 1 hour, they said, and you've made them equal to us, who have bore the burden of the work and heat of the day. But he answered one of them, friend, I am not being unfair to you. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the man who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you so envious because I am generous? Some of us have a difficult time with that, don't we? Well, they don't deserve this, but I do, because I've been doing all the right stuff. Are you envious because God is generous? I was talking to Jesse just last night, and we're talking about people who have been gifted, just natural gifts. Do you know some of these people, these annoying people? I have a friend that he can eat whatever he wants to eat. He came out of the womb ripped. The doctor was afraid to spank him because he thought that he might hurt him. The guy can eat like 3 buffets a day, not gain a pound. I look at an ice cream cone and I feel like I gained 5 pounds. Some of us know these people who like money. Money's their thing. They can touch money, and just by touching it, the golden Midas touch, bah, quadruples. And we're looking at it and we're thinking, I can't even pay a rent this month. It's not fair. Some of us, we look at families and we think, why wasn't I born into that family? They seem so normal. Mine is not. And you're just like, oh. You get envious of these people. Are you envious because God is generous? And I wonder sometimes if people look at you and they think those same thoughts. I wish I was like. God is not fair, and his economy doesn't work the same as our kingdom here. Until we can celebrate the blessings of God on people like you and me that are not deserving, we're going to be repulsed with heaven, aren't we? Think about that. If I can't right now celebrate the unfairness of God and the way he gives blessings now, think about what heaven's going to be like. Heaven then, when Jesus comes again, you're going to be sitting around a bunch of people and you're going to be like, hey, you don't deserve to be here. Heaven to you would be hell. You would look at heaven and you'd be like, God is nothing but cheap grace. He just cheaply gives grace. People who don't understand God's fairness and learn to embrace it use words like cheap grace, us and them. God calls us to embrace his unfairness. That's what the kingdom of heaven looks like. Someday you're going to be in heaven, you're going to have to look at these people and say, oh, I'm either really happy for you or I'm going to grumble and complain you're here. Which one would you be right now? I pray that I will be the person that celebrates it. Oh, you're here? And they're going to look at me and say, yeah, I can't believe you are either. How cool is this? Who is worthy? We find the angel of the Lord said, who is worthy? Only one, and that is God. Jesus calls us to reject fairness. Luke 14. I like this story. Luke 14. The context of it is that Herod has taken this really poor town and he's turned it into a really wealthy city. And what he's done is he said, okay, the poor, I'm going to use them to build up an empire here in this city. And so on the backs of the poor, the rich continue to get richer and richer. And what you would do is if you wanted to participate in this, you would invite people over. You'd throw a big party. And what would happen is you'd throw this big party, and a lot of people would be invited. And these people who you would invite, you invited them for a political reason. Because you were going to scratch their back, because they were in turn going to do what? Give you a massage. You're going to climb the ladder with these individuals. And so what they would do is they'd invite these people. And this is where this term friend comes from. In the Greek, friend, this word friend, came from this weird thing that people would do where they'd invite people over so that they might grow their empire. Friend. Think about it next time you call someone a friend. It'll mess with you a little bit. And it should. Are you friends with people only because of what you can get from them? Because if you are participating in an empire rather than a kingdom of God. And so the story goes like this. Jesus says, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, don't invite your friends, your brothers or relatives or the rich neighbors. If you do, they might invite you back, and so you will be repaid. It's just a commentary of what was going on. They'll invite you back. You guys will rise on this ladder. It says, don't participate in the empire. Do this instead. When you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. God has blessed you. He asks you to bless others. He's given you what you don't deserve. Go do the same for others. Can you imagine what our conversations would look like if we truly understood this? Show them my sweet comics. So proud of this. Yeah. Isn't that nice? Why are you doing this? I didn't do anything. The other responds, I know. Isn't it great? That would seem weird to us, wouldn't it? The one says, I don't deserve this. Neither do I. Isn't this awesome? The one looks over and says, what are you expecting in return? What's in it for you? Nothing. People would think we'd gone mad. Another conversation might look like this. But the world doesn't do this. The world doesn't look like this. I know. But God's does. Which kingdom do you participate in? Which kingdom will you participate in? The kingdom of heaven is about dropping the scorecard because God has gotten rid of it. And the central message is simple. It's that God loves and accepts you as you are, forgives you, and it's not fair. And we can spend all day looking at each other's flaws, but that's not what we're called to do. We're called to love each other unfairly like God has done for us. And that changes hearts and transforms lives. On the cross, Jesus, chapter 23 of Luke, verse 42, he's on the cross and he's got two thieves. The word thieves, it is not this idea that these men went and stole something. A thief, in this context, was a political insurgent. It's someone who was participating in the empire. They were doing something violent. They were using eye for an eye. And now they're there on the cross with Jesus, and the one looks over and says, Lord, remember me in your kingdom. When your kingdom reaches its fullness, remember me. And Jesus says, no, you're evil. You don't believe the right thing, right? That's what you might say, or I. Jesus says, of course. Today I tell you, you will participate with me in my kingdom. The kingdom of heaven is a place where the people who show up last get in. Where the people who are messed up and evil and politicians, prostitutes, get in. There's a story in Luke 15 about this boy. He takes all of his a bunch of the money that his father had saved up, and he runs off with it. And he just uses it wastefully, extravagantly. But he ends up unhappy. He ends up eating with a bunch of pigs. And if you're a Jewish person and you think pigs are the devil, they're evil, you don't eat them, it's not kosher. Think about what that means when you're eating with the pigs. To a Jewish culture, that boy would not be allowed back in a Jewish community. He's eating with the pigs. But in verse 20, as he's walking home, he's thinking, if I can just be a servant to my dad, if I can just be a servant, I would be happy. And he's rehearsing this in his mind, and dad sees him, and it says in verse 20, he runs to him. Now understand this. A first century patriarch had long flowing robes. Try running in a long flowing robe. Ladies, have you ever worn like a banquet dress? What if I told you run a mile in that quickly? You'd say, you're crazy. I've got these awesome heels. I don't want to break them. It would be crazy. The patriarch wouldn't run because running was a sign of weakness. They don't run. Servants run for them. And so the son sees the father running to him. All of the ideas of who the father is thrown out. Think about what God does for us. Sends his son to become part of our world, and he is humble and meek. He shows weakness so that we might understand what strength is. Think about this. The best robe. The best robe is put on the father. The father takes his best robe, places it on the son. His robe of righteousness is placed on the son. Think about this one. This is so much fun for me. The fatted calf. A lamb and a goat would feed an entire family, up to 20 people. A first century village would have upwards maybe to about 110 people. A fatted calf would feed 100 people. You didn't have a refrigerator that you could open it up and be like, leftovers. Not only does Jesus say the Father wants to reconcile himself to him, he brings the whole community to let the Son know you are reconciled with not just me, but the whole community. And this elder son watches and he is sickened by it. He hates what he sees because for this elder son, he's disgusted by God's generosity. He's disgusted by God's unfairness. Because for a lot of us, we think of heaven and hell in terms of separation. Heaven's over here, hell's down here. It's not about separation, it's about integration. And let me tell you what that means. It means this: the eldest son is experiencing hell because he's at a party and he's not participating. You want to experience hell? Live in this world right now and decide not to participate with God in his kingdom now. Only look forward to another time someday far off. You want to live hell? Do that. Don't participate in the party. That's hell. It's not about separation, it's about integration. And God is calling his people to be a people that are participating with God in his unfairness, giving his grace and his love unfairly to those who don't deserve it. Because that's you and that's me. Because someday in heaven, again, I can imagine it. We're experiencing this now, and when we go to heaven with Jesus again someday, this is what it looks like. You'll look at me and you'll say, dude, I didn't think you could make it. You'll say, I know. I didn't think you were gonna, what's he doing here? And what we come to the conclusion of is that God is so good. And we take these crowns and we realize we're not deserving because the only one who is worthy is Jesus. And we throw them at his feet and we say, worthy is the Lamb. And we participate with God in his celebration of unfairness with him now, and we do it through eternity. That is living kingdom now. It's not fair, but it is good. That's the kind of kingdom you and I should be participating in now. Stand with us as we celebrate that unfairness, God's kingdom now that stretches into eternity.